Hello beautiful, welcome to another video. In this video I'm going to talk about how to really maximize your gap years. Sometimes you may not want to take a gap year, sometimes you may actually want to, and these are just a few of my tips on how to do that. So I took 4 years out of school, unintentionally. Kind of definitely wasn't my plan whatsoever, but I feel like I made the most of it, and I really want to just give you some tips on what I did versus what I would also recommend. So with gap years, I feel like you want to use it to the best of your ability, whether it was an intentional or unintentional gap year. And that's really the key part of this whole thing, intentionality. Because if kind of just decide, oh, I'm just going to take a break, I'm going to rest, that's great and that's worthwhile. But sometimes the gap year can go by very quickly. So make sure you're using it to its highest extent. So some of the things that I wanted to suggest was, for one, explore. So that can be exploring physically, traveling, take a road trip, take a few days out of like your regular life and go somewhere different. And it doesn't have to be an elaborate trip to like a foreign island or a foreign nation. You can definitely do that if you want, but go visit some of your parks in your local like city or country. Go to like one state over, one country over if you can. Go like hang out in the woods with your friends. Like, make something special out of this gap year. Be intentional with the time that you have, and if you want to spend more time with like your friends, more time with your family, try to use those little moments to create experiences and memories that are going to be worthwhile. So the other part of that exploration is exploring yourself and really learning about yourself. This was something I did unintentionally. It was around that time where I stepped out of college that I kind of began to explore more about myself, my beliefs, and I was very intentional about this. I really wanted to challenge myself to step out of the way I'd been raised, the way I'd been kind of conditioned by my family, and really try to start to think for myself. And that might seem negative to some people, but it really forced me to come to terms with how I thought about things, how I thought about myself. And that journey that I started all those years ago still continues to this day, but I am so proud of the person I've become because I was so intentional about what I wanted to try out. And I really tried out, very different things and things I never would have considered before. And along with that, ask yourself some difficult questions. So if you are someone who is in college for a specific path, you stepped out perhaps because it was it was burning you out, it was too stressful, or, for any other reason, perhaps this is a good time to really ask yourself if this is something you want to pursue. So I've always said that, like, if I didn't want to become a doctor or I didn't want to be in medicine, now I want to become a nurse. But if I didn't want to be in medicine, I don't think I would have pursued college. And that's just my reality, because I don't know, it's like, it feels at this point, unless you really want to do something special or like specialized, I should say, a degree isn't really necessary in today's climate. And if you are someone who isn't necessarily looking for a postdoc or a post-secondary degree, and you're someone who kind of want to play around with your skills and explore what it is you can do, use your gap year to learn some new skills and to hone and grow the skills you already have. And I'm not necessarily going to say you have to make it into a side hustle or you have to make it into a business, but if it's something that interests you, and like, for example, if you're really good at woodworking or art or graphic design and you want to play around with things and kind of reach out to members in your community or friends or family and kind of extend that gift to them in like making things for them or repairing things or whatever, use your gap years as that time to really kind of nourish your skills and nourish yourself, especially if you've been burnt out. Like, let yourself be creative. And on the other side of that, if you're someone who perhaps is getting burnt out by like all of the school pressures of school, the grades, the constant structure. Because sometimes structure can be good, but sometimes it can be a little overwhelming, especially when you're expected to take like 3, 4, 5, 6 classes in a semester. It's very easy to get overwhelmed and burnt out, especially if you're in like an accelerated program. It's just very hard to navigate. So if you're taking time off, perhaps you can use this time as a way to really like learn something for yourself, create a project for yourself, create a curriculum for yourself. I know the personal curriculum is very popular nowadays, so maybe you choose one topic, and I'm gonna say start with one. Don't go and make like a whole curriculum of all these random things. Start with one thing, going with the skills that I mentioned, honing a skill or honing a particular your interest in subject matter, and really dive into it and let it be immersive. Let it be something that you can kind of experience it with all your senses. So for example, if you're interested in art history, maybe you get some books on art history, but you also go to an art museum. Maybe you attend like webinars or talks with other people who are interested in art history, or lectures, or you find lectures online. Like at this point, we're at the point where most anything is on YouTube or somewhere online with a quick Google search. So if there's something you really just are passionate about and you want to know more about, and you want to just go down a rabbit hole without anyone holding a grade over your head or holding a word limit over your head or a page limit, then use your gap year or gap years to explore and to just be super intentional about learning about one thing. And you might find that by the time you come out of it, if you still want to go back to school and you still have that intention of going back to school, then you're going to be much more prepared and much more rejuvenated. And especially if you take the time to learn in a way that you enjoy, I feel like when you come back, you'll be more receptive to learning new things. I feel like college has a tendency to burn out your desire to learn and your sense of learning. A lot of us, growing up in elementary, middle, high school, like learning was so fun. You loved each of your classes. You loved doing all these new things. And then all of a sudden, when you get to college or even in high school, it feels like everything is like crammed down your throat. And it becomes harder to be willing to learn. For me, it's reading. I loved reading growing up. I could read super quickly. And even now, in the like between breaks, when I do read a book, I can read it within like a day, and it's so fun. But when I constantly have to read research at papers and journals and hundreds of pages of like readings for each of my classes, it can get very frustrating and overwhelming to have to read, and suddenly it doesn't become my favorite thing. So if you found that school has dampened some of your creativity or some of the things that you used to like, then definitely take the time to nourish those things again and rekindle the love that you have for it. And I think that's really special. So explore, discover yourself, take time to really nourish yourself, and just find some joy in life again. Which might sound like a really like daunting task, but it really is about reconnecting with yourself. And this gap year or gap years might be the most transformative time of your life. Like going into my own personal story, when I stepped out of college, it was not intentional, but it was something I needed at the time. I was working 2 jobs. It was right during COVID. It was 2021. And I was working 2 jobs, and I was just burnt out in more ways than one. And I was working 2 jobs and school. So I was really mentally burnt out and physically burnt out. And I still continued to work after leaving school, but pretty soon after that, I was able to move out, and I found a new sense of freedom on top of that. And it was just like a freedom of being able to create different things. And I started a business, and I like was designing things, doing things I'd never done before, and it was really nourishing for me to be creative in that way again. But over the course of the several years, I really began to ask myself, do I even want to go back to college? Do I really still want to be a doctor? And really like challenge myself, like, why do I want to become a doctor? It was something that I'd been saying since I was a kid, and it was something I was like, I was almost being held to because I had said it so much and said it for so long, and I really had to like come out of that space where it was just a childhood dream to really looking at the reality of it. Like, the reality was that while I was working and going to school, there were classes where I was good at, I was decent at. I had like a 3.2 GPA, but there were other classes where it was not easy for me whatsoever, and I really struggled. And, you know, thinking about my grades in respect to medical school and thinking of all the extra things I'd have to put on my resume that I wasn't able to do during my first 3 years, like all of that was really stressful for me. And you know, as I was really thinking about like the requirements, like would I even get into medical school, the MCAT, like I don't really test very well. Hopefully, you know, over time that will change. But everything I experienced, I moved like several times throughout those years. I got to live in Sedona, Arizona, which was really fun and really eye-opening for me in so many ways. It opened my eyes to like alternative forms of medicine, and I really like played around with the idea of becoming a naturopathic doctor for a little bit, and that's still kind of on my bingo card. But during that time I really transformed again, like I said, and I really had to think about what it is I want to bring in the world, what kind of care I want to provide. And with that, nursing came into view, and I was like, okay, I feel like nursing would be a little bit more you know, hands-on and caring in the way that I want to care for a patient. And on top of that, just like the sense of wanting to start sooner. I didn't want to go through 4 years of medical school and then, you know, 3 to 4 years of residency. I didn't want to take up more time, and that's just me personally. I'm not saying that, you know, your gap year should be your time to rush through life. It shouldn't be at all. But I got to the point at turning 25 last year where I really just was like, I'm tired of exploring for now, in that I've lived many different places, I've kind of like had many different jobs, but they've only been jobs. And I got to a point where I was like, I want a career, I want to settle down, I want to have a home. Like, these are like the big girl things that I'm finally like, you know what, this is where I want to be. And nursing just made sense. And then soon after I made that choice, I found out that the university that I plan to go to has an accelerated program that's 1 year, and that felt doable. And at the time when I started my semester at ASU, and I kind of made it clear and made it like, I was like, to my advisor, I'm like, I want to finish in 1 year. I had 1 year left at my previous school. I want to finish in 1 year. And so I had to take some extra classes. I had to do some extra things. It was stressful. And now I'm like 2 weeks away from graduating. So, you know, here I am. I'm gonna get my degree finally. And it's really exciting, and it's really empowering to know that like this leg of the journey I've done all by myself. I made the choice to go back to school. I had my own financial aid and, you know, applied for my own financial aid. And just, it feels like every point from me leaving before to now has been entirely me and entirely my choice. And that has been empowering. And every experience that I've had has been entirely because of my choices. And again, it's empowering, and I learn more about life and adulthood and realities. And yeah, I really just forced myself to experience. I haven't experienced all the things, I haven't done all the things, but you know, I allowed myself to really explore who I am explore my values, explore, what it is I would and wouldn't do. I've had like a ton of piercings and I do kind of miss them, but I took some of them out and, I'm getting to a point where I'm like, you know what, I'm finding my style, like, and I'm still growing. Like, being in school doesn't mean you stop growing. It doesn't mean you stop exploring. It just kind of puts a damper on your time a little bit. So I've been rambling a lot, but that is what I would say for anyone who wants to use their gap years, or wants to take a gap year. And also, don't be afraid if that one gap year turns into 2 or 3 or 4. And don't necessarily like cancel or put off the idea of ever going back to college. I was definitely in that boat, but once I got to a point where I was like, well, I actually do need to get my degree. For me, I was like, I did 3 years, I might as well finish. But also, I knew I needed it for my career. And I stand by what I said before. You don't necessarily need a degree unless it's something that you end up really needing for your path in life. But also, you can also take like individual courses with universities or community colleges. Like, don't limit your sense of learning just because you may or may not get a degree. And yeah, like, don't stop learning regardless of your college status. It's really not that important. And use this time to create. I said it before, but create. Like, you might find yourself creating a super successful business, or you might find yourself, I don't know, just finding a passion of yours that you never thought was possible. And try to find the gratitude in your gap year. I really do hope that it's not something where it's like, I'm unemployed, I'm not doing anything, and I'm just sitting and wasting away. Don't do that to yourself. Like, let yourself relax, of course. I'm not saying to like immediately dive into all these things I've been saying, but take some time to rest. Take some time to disconnect. Especially, that's one more thing I should add. During your gap years, it may really feel like everyone else is moving on without you, especially if you follow like some of your high school friends or your college friends on social media. It can feel very bad sometimes, especially if you're in a low point. It can feel kind of sad and bittersweet to see like your friends graduate, or to see, people achieving their dreams like they said they would. And don't get discouraged by that. I try to like alchemize that by being grateful for them and being like congratulating them and being genuinely happy for them, because they're doing exactly what they wanted to do. But at the same time, I would never ever be ungrateful for the years that I took off. They literally built me and created me into who I am, and I experienced so many different things that, when I recall it to other people, like, it feels like I've lived more life in just a few short years, because I went after things and I did things. And also, don't think that just because I'm in my 20s that makes it like that's the reason I'm able to do it. You can be any age. And I feel like people who are older are like so, they think so much that because they're older they're not able to do stuff, but that's not true. Just like the same thing of like, if you're older, you're still allowed to go to school, you're still allowed to go back to school and finish your degree, you're allowed to be 50, 60, 70, 80 and back in school. Like, your age is just a number. And I do want to share this because in developmental psychology, as I was reading like the stages of what like each stage is considered, like emerging adulthood is 18 to 25. Like, we are so conditioned to think that like as soon as we're 18 we're an adult, we have to figure everything out. But emerging adulthood is 18 to 25, and it can go either way, right? And then early adulthood is like 25, your mid-20s to like your 30s, late 30s. That's early adulthood. Middle adulthood starts maybe around 45 to like 65, 70. How crazy is that? Like, we are so taught to think that our 20s are our early years of adulthood, and then we have our 30s, and that's adulthood, and we have to have everything figured out right then and there. That's not the case. It is never too late. It's never too late to learn something new. It's never too late to follow your dreams. It's never too late to do exactly what you said you were gonna do 20, 30 years ago. You can be a housewife whose kids have just gone off to college, and maybe you wanted to become a lawyer. You are not too old to do that. Okay, I don't care what age you are never too old to do what you want and what you love, and you're never too old to learn something new. And if you're someone where maybe you're at a point in your life where learning takes you a little bit longer, try to find a mentor. Find someone who's willing to sit with you and teach you these things one-on-one, right? Maybe you'll get overwhelmed in a bigger class, but find someone. Reach out to people who are experts in their field, who are experts in your community or your city, and ask them if they would be willing to like let you be their apprentice, right? Like, get creative with how much you want to push for this. Don't give up at the slightest like pushback. I don't know, I feel like I'm just like getting motivated. Like, don't give up on yourself. That's the biggest part. Don't give up on yourself, regardless of the circumstances around your gap year or your gap like decade. Regardless of the circumstances, don't give up on yourself. Don't look at everything that's going on and think that that is a limiting factor. A limiting factor in science and biology is the thing that like prevents the rest of the reaction from going. And I see that in so many different aspects of life. Like, you are limited by that limiting factor if you allow it to be a limiting factor, if that makes sense. So don't let your age be a limiting factor. Don't let your education be a limiting factor. Don't let your experiences in life be a limiting factor. Don't think that because you've gone through certain things that that is the end all be all of your life. You don't have to be like your parents if you don't want to be like your parents. You don't have to be what you were raised as or who you were raised as if you don't want to be. You are your own person. This is your life. You can do exactly what you want and what you desire to. And if it's not exactly what you wanted, be lenient with the universe or God or whatever, and allow it to redirect you, and allow what you said you wanted to guide you to what you actually want. I'm not gonna get too like woo-woo and spiritual, but like sometimes we think so much that we want one thing where it's like it's only a part of a picture. It's a part of a bigger picture, and there's something better that can happen for you, and there's something better that you can do. So for example, for me, I wanted to become a doctor because that was all I thought that healing encompassed. And then I learned about alternative medicine and herbalism, and like a whole new world opened up for me where I'm like, I love this. And exploring personalized medicine and wanting to provide care that's individualized is really important to me. So yes, I am planning on going to nursing at the moment, but it's not necessarily going to be where I stop. I want to keep learning, and I want to keep growing as a person so I can get to the place where I can provide that personalized care that I want to. And allow yourself to make mistakes, allow yourself to fall, allow yourself to just figure things out, because you know, if you stop right when it's like it gets hard or things don't work out, you're never gonna see what else is possible, and it's not worth it to not see what else is possible. So yeah, if I have to say anything else, I will just repeat what I said before. Don't give up on yourself. These gap years, this gap year, one or more, is for your benefit, and use it and see it and be intentional about making it so. Thank you. I'll see you in the next video.